Welcome back to another episode of Drilling It Down. This is your host, Wes Lyon, President and CEO of McGill and Lyon Dental Advisors and co-editor of the McGill and Lyon Dental Advisory. With me today, I have a very special guest, Mr. Dave Mathews himself, or in this case, David Mathews, not the band. For those of you not watching, David's a little tanner than the Dave Mathews that's super famous, but he's about to be famous too. So
I didn't realize you noticed the tan. But,
you know, I noticed a little bit. But David is a transitions advisor here at McGill and Lyon Practice Transitions, and we kind of laugh. We call him the genius behind the scenes, but now we're bringing him out to the forefront. You know, we are a pretty lean operation, but there are a lot of really good people that help us pull this off, and David is one of them. He's a superstar. So, David, super excited to have you on here and talk about 5 biggest mistakes people make transitioning.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. Love the studio.
Hey, we're getting better and better. This is our 4th iteration of the
Right,
studio.
Right. It definitely looks great, man. But yeah, no, thanks for having me on. And yeah, there are a lot of aspects that, people usually look past on and really focus on the dollar number when they think about a transition. And, we think it's always better to get these, high level items across and make sure that they're thinking about it a little bit in advance. So hopefully, and that hopefully helps them kind of have success when they eventually get to that point.
Definitely. I wanted to touch on this. So, kind of funny little insights to how I think and how I do this. I get about 3 or 4 phone calls in the same week regarding the same problem, and we're going to come on here and talk about it, because if I'm getting that many phone calls, then it's probably existing a little bit more. So this article, for those of you on the free podcast, we're actually bringing it to the forefront, but this was published a few months back. So those of you not subscribing, go to newsletter.mcgillandlyon.com, subscribe to the newsletter. $300 a year, 15 minutes a month. Read it while you're drinking a cup of coffee. It's the best $300 you will invest into yourself. But hey, if you're not serious, you don't care, don't do it. Screw it up. But for $300 a year, you will get the best advice out there. Now, a couple phone calls that really instigated this. One, I had somebody who'd offered partnership verbally to an associate, and she was kind of walking through how it's going to work, all these different things. And I kind of, it was the numbers she's after, but I kind of said, hey, I'm just being honest. I think the real issue is you don't seem that excited about this individual.
Yeah.
Like, are you sure you want to be a partner with them? And
Right.
she was like, I don't know.
Right.
I'm like, oh, that's the numbers we can easily help you with.
Right.
That's no problem.
Right.
But this is a marriage,
Right.
and you got to decide if you want to get married.
It's a very personal affair. Like a partnership is always something that's going to be with you for the rest of your life.
Oh, yes.
And so whatever you reap from it, it will stay with you. So it's very important that it's structured the right way, of course. But as you said, it's important to really have that, fundamental question addressed. Do I want a partner? Am I partnership material? And, the earlier you address those questions, the better. It keeps your options open.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Then the other call I got was one of our clients. He signed an agreement with somebody selling practices to DSOs, and there is a breakup fee in there and all sorts of things. And,
Right.
they're claiming, oh, we're just going to take it and offer, and there's no commitment. You don't have to do it. Oh, but if you don't do it and we bring you an offer, you'd have to pay us $31,000. And like, okay, that's not it. I know, David, you do a lot of the behind-the-scenes work on the DSOs, and, we don't do that, and we never will. I think probably for every 100 people that call trying to sell to a DSO, we maybe entertain 10 of them, and maybe 3 or 4 actually move forward of the 100.
Yeah.
That's probably pretty fair.
Yeah, I would say so. I was going to say, 9 out of 10 cases, you have that fundamental discussion about what this doctor's looking for. What are you looking for from a transition? And by the end of the conversation, it becomes very evident, like, DSO is not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Because
or they're just not really a DSO candidate, and they don't know it.
Yeah. It's more of a discovery call.
Like, we break down the numbers, and it's like, hey, Dr. New's going to give you $1.5 million in cash, and you're going to walk out the back door, or you're going to get like 1.7 in cash from the DSO, but you're going to have to work back for 5 years.
I had the exact conversation like last week. This doctor, they have a wonderful practice, but just as a function of what they they want to do in the next couple of years, they're not looking to commit to a long-term post-sale commitment. Like they're looking at a 12-month exit, but the margins are great. But if you take that post-sale commitment down from 5 down to a year, the economics change, and the offer really isn't a lot better than what a doctor could give you.
No.
And sometimes people struggle kind of taking that in because DSOs are great at getting that message across. Like they'll show you why their deal is, going to create generational wealth or whatever the tagline is for the season. But don't get me wrong, there are individuals who get offers that make sense.
No, and if we're being honest, private equity has created more generational wealth than any industry in America, just not for the people that sold the businesses.
Well said. But there are. I mean, I must mention both sides to it. We definitely have clients who have had great success, doing a deal with the DSOs. But it's also important that we highlight the fact that that's 1 out of 10.
Now let's jump into it here on these 5, Dave. The first is, waiting too long to prepare.
Right.
So, what's your ideal time frame to start preparing for a transition?
I think this is something that everyone should think about. Like, if you're a solo doctor and looking at, what the next 5 to 10 years look like, well, that's a good start because you're thinking about it early enough. The biggest issue we have is when we get a call from someone who's 12 months away from walking away. At that point, the only door we can really open is the one where you put it on the market for 100%. It's 100% sale. And the concerns with that is, definitely, for an attractive practice, you're going to get, an abundance of offers. It's going to be a competitive market in the right city, So definitely, I'm not saying that it's not a viable option. I'm just saying if you were to address it maybe 5 years prior to your exit, we would have had a lot more options to address.
It's actually my favorite way to transition, but not every practice will really apply to that.
Right.
So if you've got, let's kind of break it into 2 here. Mm-hmm. Right. I think if you're a solo doc, would you say 5 years is fair?
Yeah.
10 is better. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. The earlier, the better.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think if you're a solo doc, 5 years is probably fine, with some exceptions though.
Yeah.
So if you're super high producer, you might have a problem.
Right.
So we might need to go a different route. Or if you have associates or very large practice. So the larger the practice, I'd almost say 10, maybe even 12 in some cases.
Yeah.
I mean, the larger the practice is, the more time you need in general. So I'd say bread and butter solo doc is probably fair at 5.
Right. Yeah, and again, it's important to say none of this is cookie cutter kind of approach, right? Like every practice is unique and it needs to be addressed accordingly. And as you said, based on the size of the practice, the exit strategy will change. It's not going to be a straightforward transition. And that probably pivots us to what, a partnership really looks like, for something of that size. Because if you have a bunch of associates who want to really, participate in what this practice is about, that's not a short-term plan. That's a long-term plan. So, yeah, the bigger the practice, the longer the timeline. And if you're looking at something that is, potentially going to enter into a partnership with his associates, we need to make sure that there is enough time for the practice to grow to address the economics of it all, right? Like the last thing we want to happen is for you to sell a piece to somebody and for that to result in, your cash flow getting a hit significant. I mean, of course, you're going to take a hit because you're not 100% owner anymore. But if there's a way to mitigate it by growth or whatever strategies we have, it's something we should definitely think about.
Or there are some practices that are even maxed out and they're just so big, they're not going to get any bigger.
Yeah.
But the doctor's just adamant they're not going to sell to a DSO.
Right.
Well, if you're not going to do that, it's a partnership.
Yeah.
And so let's kind of dive into why we're saying 10 to 12 years. I'll kind of give you hypothetical examples here.
Right.
Hey, I've got a $5 million ortho practice and I want to extract the value, but I really don't want to sell to a DSO. I actually had this conversation yesterday, but it's even bigger than that. And I was like, well, we need to plan now because, you can't just, and this was the exact conversation. He kind of said, I've got associates, but they're not.
Gotcha.
They're not ownership.
Yeah. And that,
Okay.
and, having that assessment in itself is a big win.
So if we're there, though, this becomes the problem of the practice is too large to sell at once, right? So now you're going to have to enter into a partnership or sell it to a DSO in all likelihood. You could sell it to an individual, but needle in the haystack, just not is likely they're going to be able to get the money.
Right.
And I generally would not recommend you're on the hook for like $3 or $4 million of seller financing. Just not a great strategy.
Right.
But if you've got to find the associate, you've got a date before you get married. So, we find him, her, she comes in, he comes in. If that one doesn't work, we got to go find a new one.
Right.
Then once we get it, then they've got to buy the first 50%, which isn't going to be a problem.
Right.
But in order to get the bank financing, they're going to need a track record. So they're going to have to buy half and then half later. So the whole process is 7 to 10 years.
Yeah, and that really is something that, we break down into kind of a trigger point kind of approach. As you said, there are many scenarios where there's a solo owner who is running this wonderful practice, and he just does not want to pursue the DSO route for whatever reason. And, and all those reasons are very much justified. And that being the case, it's about strategizing and making sure that that transition goes well for all parties. And that means, there's a qualitative aspect of making sure that you have the right partner or, you have the right candidate. And that requires, as you said, the dating phase. And so, we try to structure the economics of it to force a dating period. We say, once you come in as an associate, revenue needs to get to here before we discuss a transition, or where we allow you to take that first bite of the apple, kind of. And that
is the trigger point, right? It's
correct.
So it's revenue, and I'm going to break down because I actually had one the other day that fortunately y'all had put together, but they hit the trigger point, but it was off the senior doctor, not the junior. So the trigger point had two components, and the junior doctor wasn't able to buy in because he didn't do his part. And there were no hard feelings. Yeah. The junior doctor knew it.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's a fair deal. We're, as a seller, you're committing to giving him or her the opportunity to become a partner, but you need to earn it. And you have to prove yourself.
So they earn it through growth, and then I assume the outcome of that is we're looking to mitigate the income reduction.
Exactly. So as a function of that, the seller ends up really holding on to what his cash flow was prior to sale. Obviously not, when I say prior to sale, I mean prior to the associate coming in.
Prior to the partnership.
Yeah, prior to the partnership.
So if I'm making $600,000 a year and I enter into a partnership, I want to make sure when I get married, I'm still making roughly. And this isn't always the case. Some people, it's more of a transition than it is of making money.
Right.
So some people might say, hey, I'd be good at taking a pay cut of X.
Yeah, and that's the anomaly. It's our job to make sure that we present the best approach from an economics perspective, and that we consider your qualitative aspects. So if you say, hey, man, I get it, this is probably the best way to do it, but I just want to be done, then that's a whole different conversation.
No, but as you can kind of tell, this process needs to be done professionally ahead of time. And it's going to take, start to finish, because in that agreement, the associate that becomes the partner is going to be forced to buy you out upon your retirement. But to protect that junior partner, there's going to be a time period in which you're not allowed to retire.
Right.
So that's where it's, hey, you're going to need start to finish dating period, first sale, second sale, minimum of 7 years. But that's assuming everything goes splendid.
Yeah.
Right.
There are a lot of variables to it. And the 7 years timeline is when everything goes just well. You probably knew this guy from before he joined the practice.
Or maybe they were already at the practice.
Right. And there's this wonderful relationship, and you have confidence in what he can do, he or she can do, and they actually deliver on it, and it's all perfect. But if there's a variable that changes, the timeline gets longer. So I think that's why, to your point, 5 years is probably a safe bet, but if you're a larger practice, a longer timeline is definitely the better choice.
Yeah, so the reason we say 10 to 12 years, though, you kind of see this time frame. And David, I don't know if I necessarily told you when you were probably first starting here, I probably had 3 or 4 of these in like a 3-month span where I had to bring Jonathan in the room. You were probably doing the work on the back end. And the doctors just didn't. They came in 5 years before, and they had these very large practices, and none of the associates in the practice wanted to buy.
Yeah, yeah.
And, I mean, there were a couple of them I'd unfortunately just sit there and look at them and be like, if you go down this partnership route and you find somebody, it's going to be a minimum of 7.
Yeah.
But if you go and you find somebody, they come work for 12 months and they don't work out, it takes 12 months to find them, now you're back to the drawing board.
Right.
And, like one in particular I'm thinking of, the doctor was 60.
Mm.
So I kind of walked through it all with him, and then he just kind of looked at me and was like, you're basically telling me I need to sell to a DSO. And I'm like, if you want to be done at 65, you kind of do. And he's like, well, how much more money am I going to get? And I'm like,
not a lot. So
none.
It's funny because I'm working with somebody right now, and he's been great, absolutely fantastic to work with, and he grew this fantastic practice. It's a fantastic practice over the last couple of decades, to a point where he really is only producing less than like 5%, and the rest of it's run by the associates. And the comp structures are so attractive that none of the associates are really interested in ownership. And that results in a scenario where you need to look at alternatives, or you need to look at, a long-term transition process of bringing in associates that have ownership aspirations and so on. But he's 63. And so that changes the conversation. And we ended up going the corporate route. Now, he did get a great offer. It's economically very attractive. And we got like favorable terms on his commitment, post-sale, and all of that. Now, that's an anomaly. If he came to us when he was 50 or 45, very different discussion, because we could have probably structured something that went over 15 years and, phased him out in a way where the economics would have been, if not, the same, the better. So
Now, there are some qualitative aspects of that. So that's going to lead us into number 2 here.
Right.
Which we're kind of talking ways to avoid DSOs, and not everybody wants to avoid a DSO. We just want the truth out there. A lot of people do want to avoid DSOs. That's a reality. Yeah. Some people think they want to avoid DSOs, and then they have this very, very large practice, and we tell them your alternative's a partnership. They say, "Oh, ain't no way. I'm not partnership material." And there's just self-aware. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
I'm self-aware.
Yeah.
I tell my guys, I'm like, look, you can help, but like end of the day, I'm not sitting around a table for 2 hours talking about something.
Yeah,
you got about 30 seconds to get your point across to me. Otherwise, you've lost me.
The decision-making process is very efficient.
Yes. So there's nothing wrong with it. Some people will look at that alternative and go, you know what? I really don't want a partner. DSO is right for me.
Right.
So then we kind of get into backing into when they want to be done, and that kind of backs into when we get offers. So you still need to plan ahead of time, but just so everyone knows, we're not adamantly against selling to a DSO. We're just, it's not for nearly as many people as it's being sold to, which is why we kind of say that.
Because, that first conversation we have with a doctor is going to give us, it's going to be a discovery process where one of us is going to say, hey, I don't think this is what you want, and here's why. Or it's going to be, hey, it could be a possibility. But more often than not, the conversation is, doesn't sound like it.
Yes, and that second point is over prioritizing sale price over other terms, because sale price is not always cash, and generally speaking, this is going to apply to, it applies to all transactions, but I would say in general it applies much heavier to DSOs and partnerships. Right. In a DSO, the sales price, what's the work back commitment? What's the cash up front? What's the likelihood of my equity? What does this mean to me? And how does this just compare to owning it for 5 years and selling less to a new doctor?
Yeah.
And that's why we're kind of getting at, hey, a lot of people don't realize that they are over prioritizing that. I call it the dinner party number.
Right.
The dinner party number, but when you really draw it out on paper and you kind of explain what's going on, all of a sudden, that's where we say 90% of the people just don't want to do it, is they go, oh, that's
Yeah.
that's not what I thought it was going to be. And it's
Right.
like, well, no, they're not giving you. Dr. New's willing to pay $1.5 million, and they're willing to pay 3. They're paying for terms,
Right.
right? And some of it might be the 3 isn't in cash, so maybe you're getting 2.2 in cash, so you're
Right.
getting 700,000 more, but you're giving up the profit for 5 years.
Right. Right.
Or I always find this one entertaining. You probably don't get these calls because you get people calling to do partnerships the right way. I get the calls when they've gone bad. And it's like, well, I got to get this number. And it's like, well, hang on.
Right.
If the partnership's structured in such a way that you're not going to take a pay cut when Dr. New buys in, is price really the most important thing here? And I always laugh. Wade famously gets up there, and when he talks, he says, what's the least important piece of information of a partnership? People are like, what? And he's like, the price.
Right. Right.
Everything
So well
else
said,
is
yeah.
much, much more important.
Yeah.
Because if you're not going to take a pay cut, don't get me wrong, price is important. But if you're not going to take a pay cut, and Dr. New helps you grow your practice, and you
Yeah.
keep the cash flow, and you get your exit plan,
Right.
like at that point, you kind of sit there, and we see this all the time
Yeah.
where, on the increase in value typically, and
Right.
we don't need to get too far into details, but when you put someone on that trigger point that you were talking about, we kind of split the increase in value with the
Exactly.
person buying in. So they
Yeah.
actually buy in a little bit cheaper. And,
Right.
the senior doctors sometimes, well, I don't know if I want to do that. We're like, well, hang on, you're making 800,000 now. You're going to make 800,000 if he reaches the trigger point. How much do you really care about 150 grand after taxes?
Right.
Like,
Right.
if you're going to keep your income the same, and you phrase it that way, and they're like, oh, actually, I don't really care at all.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah.
let them have a goodwill gesture to have them try to boost the income quicker.
Yeah, a well-structured partnership is basically giving the opportunity for a well-performing associate to participate in the growth that they bring to the table. I mean, obviously, the senior partner has the goodwill. He or she, founded the practice, and all that's true. But from an economics perspective, if it's structured well, the existing doctor or partners shouldn't take a financial hit in any way for bringing in this new candidate. And that's where the timing aspect comes into play. And to address the second point about over prioritizing the sales price, as you said, if nothing changes in your economics and somebody's paying you to be a partner, take it.
It's a win.
It's a win.
It's definitely a win.
right.
But then there are other terms in there too. How are we going to split profits?
Right. IDFs are very, very nuanced. It's not a cookie cutter piece to any of it. Income division formulas have to really consider the nature of the practice, the type of production that they have, the mix, and all of it. And also, because here's the thing, if all of the money is split based off of ownership, then that could at some point end up penalizing the higher producer.
We had this, Jonathan and I were in Aruba this year, and we had 2 doctors sit us down, and they wanted to hire us to redo their partnership operating agreement and asking if Patrick can handle it, what can we help with. And Jonathan and I could just tell from the questions where this was heading. We see it all the time. And we're like, all right, how is it currently being split?
Yeah.
And it's being split by ownership.
Right.
And we're looking at the guys going, so at least one of you two is the highest producer. And, he goes, it's me.
Yeah.
I'm producing $6 million. The lowest partners are producing like 2 to 3, and everybody's making, $2 million.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you're about to go in there. And he didn't like the answer, but he appreciated the truth of like, hey, you just need to go ahead and get a litigator. And
Right.
he's like, why? I'm like, your practice is probably going to break up.
Right.
Because you're going to go ask 2 partners that are making way too much money to take a pay cut to make this fair.
Right.
And they're not just going to
Right.
do it. You're like,
Right.
well, it's not fair. Well, no, it's not fair.
Yeah.
But we see a lot of them get into partnerships when people are producing roughly the same, and they're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter today,
Now, yeah.
but it will matter.
Yes.
Right? How often do we get a phone call where the junior partner wants to buy out the senior partner because the senior partner is only working a day a week, but it's taking half the money?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, look, these things matter, right?
Right.
How often does somebody have to work?
Yeah.
When can you force somebody out, right? Is there a minimum work requirement in there? Like
right.
the terms, especially when there's workbacks, right? When there's workbacks, partnerships, anything,
Right,
the
right.
terms become
Much
much more important.
Yeah.
And it's not to say they're in a DSO, I'd kind of argue the terms might be equally as important as the price, but in a partnership, a lot of the times, no,
It's
I think
more
the terms
important.
are much more
Yeah,
important.
because some, we had a conversation recently with a client, and he was a senior doctor at the practice, but he bought in like 20 years ago, and at the time the split was based off of ownership, and so his thought was, well, that's how I did it, so that's how we're gonna do it, and that made up for it was a creative discussion because I understand where he's coming from because he took the hit from his senior doctor, and so he's like, hey, it's my time now. That's kind of his thought, but from his perspective, I see where he's coming from, but it may not be what works. If you want a partnership to work, it has to be a win for all parties, and for that win to be economically successful for all parties, it has to be something that's thought in advance, executed in a structured manner, and done the right way. You can't rush it.
I think to enter a partnership, one of two things has to be true.
Right.
You're either willing to take a pay cut and you understand that,
Right.
It's a quality of life decision. Maybe you are one of those super high producers. You're general dentist doing $3 million yourself, and you're going, you know what? I'm not ready to go, but I'm ready to scale back.
Right.
And I'm willing to bring this person on. There's enough profit for two of us. I'll make half. I don't care.
Right.
That's rare, but it does happen.
Right.
Otherwise, the practice has to grow. The pie has to be big enough that there's enough profit for two owners.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you have, see this way too often, the partnership agreement never comes to light until there's not enough profit to go around. And then that thing is getting waved in front of somebody's face of, look what I found.
Right.
I'm entitled to X, and people are in a fight because it is entertaining to me. There are plenty of these partnerships where, we're bringing in a new partner and everything's gone well because there's enough money, and they just call us and go, hey, we know this thing's trash.
Right.
Like, we need some help here.
Right.
But everybody's on board. One partner's leaving, one partner's coming in. They're going, hey, when this new partner comes in, we need to shore this up in case something goes bad.
Yeah.
But then you get the same ones where things start going bad, and all of a sudden the operating agreement of the partnership is,
Right.
oh, that thing is going to be key.
And sometimes, it is something we see now and then when, even if it's a solo practice, going to market for 100% sale, sometimes the number can become a sensitive item. Like, for example, we worked on one a while ago, revenue at around 1.2. We valued it at $1 million. Overhead was around 50%. So, the doctor was taking home around $600,000 a year. We went to market, and just as a function of where it was, because if you're not, in a location that attracts talent, fair market value is really determined by the market, right? So
Supply and demand.
Exactly.
If you got 20 dentists trying to buy your practice, guess what? The price is going up.
Right. We might have undervalued it because you could end up with a bidding war, or the flip side is you get somebody who wants to sit down and negotiate. And so...
And this is my advice, just real quick, what you're about to say. It's my advice for young doctors. Don't buy the practice in the city. Go to where there's no buyers.
Oh, yes.
So keep going, and then I'll come back to it.
Oh, it's so true. But yeah, like we ended up getting an offer for around $900,000, right? So a 10% cut on the asking price. And this was after a year of being on the market. So from the date from which our client wanted to exit, he had already received $600,000 in cash flow. Now, granted, he had to work for it, but that was not expected cash flow. We were hoping to exit the market within a month or two, right? And that didn't happen. So then a bigger question needs to get addressed. Like, are we going to be sensitive to that $1 million, or are we okay with it being $900,000 and walking away after 12 months of cash flow? And, that's just to bring that up, no matter what the transaction is, there's always going to be a qualitative piece to it. It's not just about the number. Because if you prioritize the money above all else, we'll have to plan way in advance and make sure that you're willing to commit to whatever it is to get there. But if there is a qualitative aspect to any of this, then the price can no longer be the biggest aspect. And even for a partnership, the terms, as you said, will really define the economics. And the same applies for DSOs, because as you said, they'll give you that number, but how much of that is take-home money on day one? How much of that, because you'll see a lot of components, rollover equity, JV equity, growth earnouts, holdbacks, which is not a big deal, but you'll see all
And
these
growth
components.
earnouts are not part of the purchase price.
I was gonna say they'll give you like a $6 million deal and then add $4 million in growth earnouts and say it's $10 million, but you got to like double the size of the practice in like 5 years. Good luck with that.
Yeah, and it's like, well, you then sold them a practice twice as big as the current one.
Exactly. You're working
really
hard to make them worth a lot more. So yeah, so all this to say, every deal, there are components that go beyond the numbers that needs to be addressed.
It's complicated.
Yeah,
But now my quick advice for young doctors listening, look, that practice in the country that's cash flowing like crazy and it has a lower purchase price already put on it and that thing's been for sale for 18 months, that doctor wants out. And I kind of warn doctors, I'm like, look, when you're selling a practice in a rural area and we don't know, I'm not telling you to take a, super low ball offer, but, in your case, you list it for 900 and we can justify more than 900 on 600,000 every day of the week. But, or you listed $1 million. We could justify higher. In Charlotte, that thing's probably over 100% of collections.
Right.
It's like, hey, we need to be realistic here and we got to set this appropriately for the market. Then it becomes, I usually warn them like, hey, just be ready for what might happen. Be great if somebody came in here tomorrow and offered you full value. If thing's on the market for a year and somebody comes in and offers you less, think through when the next offer might come.
Right.
And is that offer reasonable? And is it one you're willing to take? And figure out what you're willing to take.
The time value of money.
Because, and that's for the young doctors, because
Right.
the first go round in 3 months, they might be willing to wait. But come like 18 to 24 months, if somebody comes in there
There's
and
a
it's
deal
like
to be made.
700,000, they're like,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Tell
Where
them
do I
yes and
sign?
get them to send the money
Right.
before they back out.
And this may not be, directly related, but, it's so fascinating to see where the most profitable practices are.
Oh, they're in the country.
Oh, my God. It's crazy.
I find that one funny. I've got some people ask me, private equity's entered our space too, and they're all after these big group urban practices,
Right.
and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Man, I love the ones in the country." And they're like, "Why?" I'm like, "You guys don't know dentistry."
Right. Exactly. It's sometimes you'll see these numbers and you just learn a new lesson about what the truth is about all of it. Yeah.
Now, well, let's get into the fourth one, which is kind of self-explanatory after we went through 3, but choosing the wrong advisor. And, oh boy, can this have bad consequences. I think, kind of give everyone a background, the DSO market exploded probably starting in 2017. 2019, it really took off. Free money with COVID. 2019 to 2022, 2023 maybe even,
Right.
were just explosions.
It's the peak.
And I'm just going to go ahead and guess that 85 to 90% of those deals should not have been done. And it shouldn't have been done just simply based off a solo practice, even with a really good overhead. When you look at giving up 5 years of profits, working for a DSO versus just working the 5 years, keeping the profit, and then selling to an individual, the numbers are just very cut, dry, clear. But a lot of the people, I think, had the wrong advisor, and their advisor does not transition practices. And people are like, oh, well, can you do this? I'm like, there's nothing that special. And actually, I think, was it 97 or 99? Do you remember the first DSO deal that got done here?
I don't know.
Oh, it was in the 90s, I believe,
really?
though.
Okay.
We've been doing them for a long time. We just haven't really been advertising, pushing them to people, because it does require a special set of circumstances to make it worthwhile.
Right.
And when it is, it's great.
Yeah.
We're here to recommend it. But, if your advisor only knows how to sell practices to
So he's
DSOs,
gonna sell it to a
then
DSO.
you're going to get it
Yeah.
sold to a DSO.
Yeah.
And one of the funniest stories I have is a client somehow didn't hire us and they hired somebody else. And Wade was very kind because it was a client of mine to help out and try to get this deal where it needed to be. And they were only offered 60% cash. And I sent over a note and said, hey, the total enterprise value looks fine here, but we reviewed it. This deal should be 80% cash. And I get an email back. I've done $56 million of deals, and nobody's out there giving 80% cash. And if you know these groups, please send me the names. And I literally emailed them back, and I put, the names are the same groups that you are negotiating with right now, and they do 80% cash every day of the week with us.
Right.
And the guy never responded to me after that. I mean, he was not very happy. But I'm like, you can flex all you want. And like, they're not doing 80% right now, just to be clear. This was the heat of everything. Yeah. They're not doing 80%. Deal terms are worse. But at the time, that was the mark we could get to, was 80%.
Right.
So in this case, it probably cost them 20% of the total value in cash. It was a very large deal, a couple partners. And what do we think that rollover equity is probably worth today?
It's extremely speculative.
Probably not much.
Yeah.
Right? And then
there are many examples that we can point to where the equity ended up being nothing.
Oh, there's more of it's going to zero than people are getting rich off of by a mile.
Right.
Hopefully everyone gets something out of
exactly.
it. But I would say if you think you're going to get rich off of it, you're probably wrong. Some people will, a few.
Yeah, because I do talk to doctors who we get these offers, and then I always recommend what our counter should be, but obviously they get to decide how we go about it. And I always make sure to highlight, the equity money is like maybe money. What we need to focus on is the cash, right? And there are instances where the dentist has just had so much exposure to the DSO world, where there's this expectation of like phenomenal growth in value of the equity. And like, okay, so, what we do is we'll build out like cash forecasts. Like if we do this deal, well, this is what you're going to make over the next 10 years. And they'll be like, well, you've assumed no growth on the equity on this. I'm like, yeah, because we're not going to do that. And they'll be like, well, plug in 10% per annum. Let's see what that looks like. I'm like, we need to be in touch with the reality and how these things are probably going to play out. So let's see if the cash component makes sense, and anything else is bonus money, right? So, it's important to have that thought process, like that thought exercise and that conversation about what's really value. And if your advisor is only selling to a DSO, then this is not a talking point that he's going to want to bring up.
No, I kind of chuckle because I think you guys still do more flat fee work than anybody.
Yeah.
And it's right. I'll never forget this phone call. One of my clients calls me. He wasn't a client yet. And he just goes, hey, my name's so-and-so. Super excited to work with you. I don't even know what you do, but Jonathan told me it was $12,000 and I'm signing up. And I'm like, just out of curiosity, like, what's going on here? He's super nice. And he was like, well, I got a DSO offer for $3 million. Jonathan told me it was $6 million, and then he told me he wasn't willing to help me sell it because it was a bad decision for me. So he told me to go talk to you.
Right.
And the fact that he walked away from this huge commission, I'm going to do whatever you tell me to. And he did, and he's doing great.
Yeah.
But if you don't have other ways, like a lot of the partnership work that gets done here really started as a DSO inquiry, and then being like, hey, we could make a lot more money selling to a DSO, but we don't think that's probably your best option. Or we've got this flat fee partnership option that we think makes more sense to you.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we're not looking for like a one-time kind of a deal with anybody, right? We're just as a function of how our firm is, we're building relationships. And so we actually had this happen like late last year. We were talking to this couple, and we were looking at the DSO avenue, and as the conversations progressed, it became evident that, they were just not ready for it. And, we had spent like 4 or 5 months, prepping them, due diligence, going to market. And we totally respected that because, it's important that whatever we do makes sense to you guys. And, the relationship is still strong. We're still in touch with them. They still call me about, because right now they're thinking of bringing in an oral surgeon into it. So, it's fun to, our objective is not to always close. Our objective is to really make sure that whoever comes to us walks away with a win, right? So that really does make a difference. And that's why I like this firm. Like, I've been here for like 4 years. It's not really about the money. And everyone's really proud of that.
Yeah, it's you need an advisor.
Right.
It should be a CPA or an attorney or someone. And there's not an extreme amount of reputable people out there in my mind.
Right.
I'm not going to, tout anyone else's business. I know a couple, though. One of them famously, I got a good laugh. He sent a letter to everybody. He's famous in the Midwest. And he sent a letter to every dentist he had the contact information for, just going through all these truths of private equity. And then the very last line, one of my clients sent it to me, was, "What, do y'all want to end up like your medical practices?" And it was I just cracked up. I'm like, that's probably the simplest explanation for why, unless you're getting more money than you should, which I've done the flip side of this.
Right.
I've sat in rooms and people have been offered so much money where I've sat in the room and like, I don't care how much you hate the DSO. This is life changing. It's very rare, but some people have that special practice where I'm like, I know one, I got lunch with him the other day and it's like, hey, this is $14 million.
Right.
He's like, I hate DSOs. I'm like, so do I, man. Like, so do I. But
We're past that.
Can we talk about what's on the table here?
Right.
Like the table's either empty or it's got $14 million on it. And it was at the height of crazy offers from DSOs. So it was one, even today, I probably would have urged him not to do it. But at the time, they were just gung-ho. And he was like, "No, I don't want to do it." And they were just like, "Well, here's more money. Here's more money. Here's more money."
And it's funny. Like sometimes when we get the right candidate and we go to private equity, and we engage directly with the executives. And sometimes, if it's a new group, somebody you're connecting for the first time, they try to feel you out, like because that's how I found out that there are a lot of these advisors who are like working based off of kickbacks from the private equity side, and so they try to feel you out, and they're like, what are your expectations from this? I'm like, first of all, I don't work for you. I work for my client. So none of that applies here. And that really changes the dynamics of the whole process because then they understand that this is not going to be like a, one and done kind of deal. And that makes things difficult for everybody, but that's okay.
No, a lot of advisors, people don't realize that. A lot of these DSO and the reason people were encouraging people and talking generational wealth, they're getting paid on both sides of the deal. Yeah. And that is humongous conflict of interest.
Right.
Getting paid on both sides of the deal or representing both sides. Those are just no-goes.
Yeah.
But our last one here, and maybe the most important, I don't know if this should be 5 or 1.
Yeah.
It's neglecting your personal financial situation. So as we kind of walk through the first item of you need 5 to 10 years, you really need like 25 years. Now, it's not to say you need to be planning exactly for what your exit is, but you need to put yourself in a position that you can exit the way you want to. Right. So you can't neglect your personal financial situation because there is no DSO offer that will come to the rescue. Right. Especially, we see this all the time where somebody neglects their personal financial situation. DSO offers them money. They think, oh, great, I'll have a stockpile of $3 million. But they never addressed their spending or what was going on. So, they sold to the DSO, they cut their income by $600,000 or $700,000 a year. And, all of a sudden, 5 years later, the $3 million is gone. They have nothing, including not their practice.
Right. And I say that, like, I share this thought a lot. Like, if your personal financial planning is efficient and strategic and well executed, the amount of weight that the eventual transition carries is a lot less because you've built up to it to a point where the qualitative pieces about the quality of your life can become a factor that you can consider during this transition process. So it's something we've always kind of, because you see all the iterations, right? People who have been diligent, people who haven't, and you can always tell who's more comfortable and, who's capable of looking at those non-financial items that they want to prioritize during that transition. And that really comes from planning it for 20, 25 years. That doesn't happen overnight, right? So it's a very valid point.
It takes about 15 years from getting serious to get financially ready to retire. And if you're super young and you're starting early, it might be 20.
Right.
But just giving everyone an overview. So you work on the transition side. I work on the financial consulting side.
Right.
If somebody starts with us at 30, usually we're getting on the border of them getting out at 50. Usually if they're starting with us at 40 or later and the practice loan's been paid off, it's assuming they bought a practice early. Usually it's about a 15-year runway, and we get them out by 55. If they come at 45, get out by 60. It just depends. Older you get, how much prep work you did ahead of time.
Yeah.
But we do have a lot of people we have to play catch up on, and that sometimes dictates the transition too.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, I'd want to bring in a partner, and I'm like, I can't. A partnership is a financial risk, and it's one you can't afford.
Right.
So, they're like, well, I think we'll make more money. I'm like, I think you'll make more money too, but if it doesn't go right, then you're not going to be able to retire, and we just can't afford to take that risk.
Right.
So this is what we're going to do. We're going to shove this much money away, and we get to that number, you're going to sell 100% of it.
Right.
And you're backed into that corner.
Yeah.
There's no way out of it, because any other deal you do where you lose control, like,
that's one of the first discussions we have. We can probably, get a ballpark number of what we can expect from a transition. And then the first question we have is, well, does this get where you want to be? If not, we should pivot to that discussion before anything else.
And I've got one of my favorite clients. They called up, I don't know how many companies, but they finally called Jonathan. And Jonathan asked him that question, said, okay, before we even start talking, can you afford to do this? And
Right.
they said, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that was really the only thing stopping them. It was unfortunate because it's one of those where we had promised the associate to buy in. Now, fortunately, this associate was great and, went to him with honesty of like,
Oh, wow.
hey, we realized we can't afford to do this. It's what's holding up the deal. Here's what we're proposing. And, Jonathan was negotiating with him. He was very calm, respectful about it. And ended up being, hey, he really wanted the practice sooner. And we said, hey, are you willing to let us keep the real estate longer? And he said, yeah, I get it, perfectly fine. So, they ended up coming to a deal, but that was it. They had gone everywhere and just couldn't find the missing piece. And the missing piece was they weren't confident that this was going to work for them.
Yeah.
So whatever transition option it needs to be one you're confident is going to work for you financially.
Right.
And if that piece of it doesn't happen, then it's just.
I have a scenario where the doctor came in, and it was one of those unique situations where, private equity just got involved, and they just made a cash deal. It wasn't a big one, but they beat all the traditional doctors. But the doctor was like, hey, I don't want any post-sale commitment. Like, all right, considering the size of your practice with our presence in the area, we can make that work. We signed the LOI, and I think, because we did ask him, have you consulted your advisors on this? Does this make sense? And after he signs the LOI, he's like, hey, I can't stop working. And I was like, well, the whole point of all the negotiation we did was to get you a deal where you don't have to work. And now you're telling me you need to work. So then the conversation pivoted to negotiating the non-compete covenants. And that's a tough one to do, right? So
Did that deal blow up?
we ended up walking away. It was one of those, but
Probably the correct move.
yeah. And those things shouldn't happen, but we shouldn't be there in the first place, because if he had proper planning, it would have been a whole different discussion from the get-go.
Also, when we say proper, there's a couple things. I am a certified financial planner. I mostly hold myself out as a CPA because I will be, I find this one funny on internal forums or like groups of advisors. Oh, the CFP is just as hard as the CPA.
Right.
Nonsense. They offered me to take the CFP because it used to be 2 days in a classroom paper exam. You had to sit through the whole thing.
Okay.
So then they were moving it to a computer in like 6 hours. So nobody wanted to take the last paper one. So, 4 weeks before you're going to take this test, they send an email to everybody. Hey, you can take the final paper one for $99 instead of $750 or whatever it was.
Okay.
I was like, all right, well, I haven't even started studying yet, but $99, let's see what we can do here. Thing was a breeze. But there's a lot of concepts in there, and it's not to say that every certified financial planner is bad. There's a lot of concepts that I just wholeheartedly don't agree with, and they lack detail. One is like, hey, what does the average person spend in retirement? Like, 70 to 80% of their pre-retirement expenses. Like, that's the biggest lie I've ever seen.
Right.
Maybe some people can only afford to do that, so they're forced to it. But every doctor that I've retired, they've started spending more, right? So you need to know exactly what you are spending. And a lot of advisors don't. They just go with generic numbers, and what a generic number to them, the most often I see is like 10 grand, 12 grand. And I sit there, I go through the tax returns. We used to ask people to supply us, hey, how much personal expense is in the practice, whether your personal living expenses. We still get their personal living expenses. I stopped asking for the other stuff because I just go into the P&L and I'm like, well, you spent $35,000 last year traveling, right? That's coming back. I just start meals, you spent $8,000. That's coming back. I just start adding it. And then I can go through and trace their cash flow, and then I go to their brokerage account. So I can trace their after-tax cash flow into their checking account. So then I go to their brokerage account statement. I go, how much is making its way in here each month? And if that number is 0, then I know they're spending all of their after-tax cash flow. And you can tell me you're spending 15, but I can see you're spending 25. Right? And a lot of people will avoid that conversation because it's easier to go, hey, look, you've got $4 million. You could spend 15 grand a month for the rest of your life, versus going, especially the practice is worth more. They're worth more because they have more cash flow. And I'm like, hey, your practice is worth $3 million, but you've only saved $2 million. You've been making $1.5 million a year, and you've only saved $2 million. And then you're spending a lot more than you think. We need to get this under control before you give away the cash cow.
Yes.
And that is the number one mistake I think from my side people make, is they give it up, and then all of a sudden, they start paying attention when they're retired, because now you got to pay attention. And now it's
a lot more sensitive.
Oh shoot, we spend more than we think.
Yes. And that's why it has to be one of the first questions we answer. Like, can you afford to? Right? So,
100%. Well, David, any closing thoughts here?
No, I really appreciate having me in the 4th iteration of the studio. Appreciate that. But no, glad we got to talk about this. It's because everyone tries to define a successful transition based off of a dollar number. And the truth is there's so much more to it. The dollar number, as Wade said, is probably not even in the top 4 most important.
You could laugh. I had to make a phone call yesterday to my dad. And my brother-in-law works in private equity. So we're doing our estate planning documents. And I told my dad, I said, hey, Jonathan Martin will help you, but I need you to run my estate if something happens. My wife's not going to be allowed. He's like, okay, why? I'm like, well, I don't like the idea of somebody in private equity not honoring my commitment. So it's going to be very clear who's buying what, but I need you to take care of my people. And my dad was like, I got it. I will honor whatever you put down in that paperwork to a T. And I was like, that's it. That's,
look at that.
For me, a successful transition. Hopefully I'll be alive, but would be everybody here doing what John and Roger did, the next generation. And that's not everybody's like that. Some people want the highest dollar, but the highest dollar, and I always laugh, it's the dinner party number. Right, the highest dollar is just to brag at the dinner party, and hell,
no one's honest about it.
No,
everybody's making it up.
It was like, oh, I got 11 times EBITDA. No, they didn't. That's the first thing I know. I'm like, they did not get 11 times EBITDA. That's a lie. They are screwed. I already know right off the bat if they bought that lie.
Are you working 7 days a week now to keep up?
Yes. But for those of you that aren't subscribed, go to newsletter.mcgillandlyon.com. Make sure you subscribe. Newsletter delivered to your door each month with about 8 articles, everything you need to know. Also, we now have Drilling It Down Premium. So when you subscribe, we've got a new website and we've got a new automated podcast system. It will throw our premium podcast episodes directly to your iPhone. That way you can hear everything we're talking about. This way we can put a lot more information out there. This is valuable information. We probably, between John and I, we spend a couple hundred hours a month on this stuff. It is very valuable. We're not giving it away for free. A lot of it is gate kept for our premium subscribers, but make sure you join the thousands of dentists getting the right advice. Get the podcast, get the newsletter, 15 minutes a month reading the newsletter. And hey, while you're working out, driving in the car, you'll have 2 to 3 podcast episodes a month of premium content that you need to know. They're going to keep you out of financial trouble. And also, if you are thinking about a practice transition or you need to get your financial situation in order, this is what we do. We've been doing it for over 40 years. McGillandLyon.com. There's a contact us form. So go to McGillandLyon.com. The "and" is spelled out. Everything you need is right there. Otherwise, David, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.